I knew something was wrong, but I was afraid to admit it even to myself. And when I found out the truth, it shattered me. Wait until the end of this story to find out what happened next. You know that moment when something shifts beneath the surface, like a hairline fracture forming under glass? That's how it started. A flicker, a pixel out of place. I was on the couch one night, half watching a documentary on Venice, when a notification pinged from Ashley's laptop. I wouldn't have noticed, but the sound came twice. Once from the computer and once from her phone. That's when I looked. There was a profile on the screen, paused mid-scroll, under a name I'd never seen before, Anne Hargrave. She had Ashley's face, Ashley's smile, but an entirely different life. A bio that said she was looking for an escape hatch from emotional sedation. The words hit with the softness of a sledgehammer. That's how she saw me? Sedation? I sat there for nearly 20 minutes without moving, listening to the ticking of our kitchen clock as if it were mocking me with every second. My wife, the woman I'd met in grad school, the woman who wore my hoodie for 3 straight months when we first dated, had reinvented herself in a world I wasn't even invited to. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't even close the tab. I just memorized every word on that profile. Then I started watching. First, it was the subtle things. Yoga twice a week, but the gear was brand new, and her mat never smelled of sweat. Charges on our joint account from artisan wine cellars I'd never heard of. One night, while she was asleep, I found a folder on her desktop titled Financial Freedom 2026. Inside was a spreadsheet so precise it could have passed as a corporate report. Projected savings, asset division, custody clauses, and stapled to that digital file like a cruel joke was a downloaded PDF titled Strategic Divorce, A Woman's Guide to Getting It All. That was the night something broke in me. I began sleeping less, pretending more. I let her kiss me goodbye in the mornings, then sat at my desk revisiting her profile like it was a murder scene. My wife was planning her exit like a military operation, except she hadn't realized I'd already found the blueprint. 2 weeks later, I ran into Derek while walking to a coffee shop on a Sunday morning. We hadn't seen each other in years. We'd shared a couple business law classes at UT, and even though we were never close, it felt good to see someone who remembered me before the cracks. He mentioned he'd been seeing someone lately, a married woman, an art dealer from Austin. Said her name was Anne. I played dumb. He didn't know what Ashley looked like. He didn't know her real name, but I knew the timeline. 6 months ago, that's when Ashley started wearing perfume again. Derek laughed when I asked if they were still seeing each other. Sometimes, he said, when she's in New York. She wasn't just planning to leave. She was rehearsing it. There had been at least 4, sometimes, 4 cities, 4 lies. I thanked Derek for the coffee and walked home in a haze. On the kitchen counter, Ashley had left a note. A little post-it in her handwriting with a kiss drawn in the corner. Running to yoga, left you banana bread. I stared at it for a long time. How many times had I eaten her lies baked in almond flour and cinnamon? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But that night, I removed the photo of us from my wallet. I replaced it with a folded printout of her dating profile. That version of her, the stranger named Anne, was now my wife. And I wasn't going to lose sleep wondering why. I was going to find out who she really was and what it would take to beat her at her own game. It's strange how quickly you can get used to pretending. I found myself navigating 2 versions of life. One where I was the doting husband who smiled at Ashley's stories about her yoga teacher with a crooked jaw, and one where I tracked the locations of every hotel she ever booked under the alias Anne Hargrave. I kept notes, dates, receipts. I wasn't even sure what I'd do with them, not yet, but collecting evidence became its own kind of therapy, a ritual that made my hands stop shaking. Ashley's laptop, once a shared tool of grocery lists and home decor mood boards, had become a map of her exit. She was slick. The Financial Freedom 2026 file hadn't been updated since I first saw it. Instead, she stored new files inside folders named for mundane things. One was labeled Tax Prep 2023, but inside were PDFs from New York galleries, client itineraries, and plane tickets to places she never told me about. That's how I found out about San Francisco, and that's what pushed me into making contact with Derek again. I didn't call. I waited. 3 days later, I walked into a downtown coffee shop I knew he frequented, ordered the same thing I used to in college, sat near the back and waited for him to notice me. He did. We caught up, briefly. He had no idea what he was feeding me when he told me about the art dealer again, casually dropping that she liked to be called Anne, even during sex, that she was tired of being a wife and loved being a muse. The rage came fast. It was pure, high voltage, barely containable. I stared at his smile, at the way he talked about her like she was some secret he'd earned. I wanted to smash a mug into the side of his skull, but I smiled instead. I leaned forward and asked him the one thing I needed. Was it still going on? He shrugged too casually. Sometimes, when she's in New York. There was something in me that clenched then. Not pain, not grief, something colder. It was the moment I stopped seeing Ashley as my wife and started seeing her as an opponent. Because it wasn't just about sex or lies anymore. It was about intent. She didn't fall into this. She climbed in willingly. That night, she came home humming to herself, wine on her breath, and kissed me with a softness that felt rehearsed. I watched her move through the kitchen, setting down a box of overpriced pasta from a boutique grocery downtown. She was planning a dinner party with potential clients. It would be small, intimate, mostly men. I asked how yoga was. She said restorative. I said nothing. The next day, I began building a new identity. It started with a burner email, then a business profile. I used an old friend's name as a reference and bought a prepaid phone. The alias, Logan Hale, an eccentric tech guy from Seattle with a fascination for conceptual art and a promise of investing in an upcoming gallery space. Then I booked her. Under her work email, Ashley received a consultation request from Logan, who claimed he'd been referred by a Manhattan collector. I made sure the details matched things she'd posted on LinkedIn. The consultation would happen via Zoom. I even included a note that he had visual sensitivities and preferred a dimmed camera with voice masking software. She replied within an hour, said she was intrigued, offered 3 different time slots. I chose the one during her usual yoga fitting. The call was surreal. I wore glasses I hadn't touched in 5 years, changed my hair, grew out stubble. I found software that shifted my voice down just enough to sound like someone else entirely. When the call connected, she smiled immediately. She didn't recognize me. She looked radiant, a little too eager. Said she loved the idea of an installation about curated loneliness, and that she had just the artist in mind. I asked for pieces that expressed luxury without intimacy. She called that her specialty. For 27 minutes, she sold me on illusions, while sitting less than 10 feet from where I once built her a bookshelf. When I ended the call, I thanked her for her time and promised to follow up. Then I ghosted her. 2 days later, she emailed Logan twice. By the third, she was concerned. I watched her bite her thumbnail that night at dinner, her knee bouncing under the table. She looked distracted. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, because for the first time in weeks, I felt alive. She had no idea the ghost she was chasing was the man she'd married. And I wasn't finished. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. And if she wouldn't give it to me willingly, I'd bleed it from her life, piece by piece, until she couldn't tell where Anne ended and Ashley began. A week after I vanished as Logan Hale, Ashley started sleeping with her phone under her pillow. At first, she just seemed annoyed, a little distracted, like she'd misplaced something important and couldn't remember where she left it. But by day 4, I noticed the twitch in her fingers, that unconscious need to refresh her inbox, check her spam folder. She even asked if I'd heard anything weird about Outlook security breaches. I told her the only breach I was aware of was the $80 dinner she put on our shared card labeled client engagement. I said it with a smile. She laughed, but her eyes scanned mine like she was looking for a trap. It was time to press harder. I created an Instagram account, anonymous, cryptic, black and white posts with captions that sounded like broken aphorisms. I called it the Velvet Eye. The first few posts got little attention. Lines like, "Art is what lies do when they put on a dress," and "Emotion sells best when it's dead inside." A few likes here and there. Then I made it personal. Post number 5 was a carousel. The last slide showed a woman's back, her posture tense, shoulders slightly turned, wine glass in hand. It wasn't Ashley, but it could have been. And that was the point. The caption? She says she sells feelings, but all I saw were price tags. It went viral. Comments exploded with speculation. The image was ambiguous enough to invite gossip. A few influencers picked it up, calling it a raw critique of Austin's faux intellectual art circle. I didn't even tag her. I didn't need to. People connected the dots on their own, and Ashley's phone didn't stop buzzing for hours. She took a call in the guest bathroom that night, whispering. I sat on the stairs outside the door and listened to her say things like, "They don't know it's me, and it's just a troll, a jealous one." That was when I decided to up the pressure. I found a co-working space in the same complex where she hosted her invite-only art events. Rented a modest suite under a shell name, decorated it with abstract canvases from a liquidation warehouse. And every Thursday, I made sure I was there, dressed differently each time, quiet, forgettable. Sometimes I'd walk past her gallery floor just long enough to hear her voice pitch upward as she hosted buyers who didn't know they were being sold illusions. She didn't see me, but I saw everything. One night I slipped a small card into a display binder at her party. It was from the Velvet Eye, a quote in silver ink. Your muse is fraud. Your frame is empty. By morning, she deleted her LinkedIn and switched her Instagram to private. Panic was setting in. I watched it move through her like smoke in a locked room. Slow, choking, impossible to grasp. 2 days later, she brought up therapy. She said she was feeling anxious, said she thought people were talking about her. I offered to find a good psychologist, told her I'd heard about one who specialized in identity crises. She didn't laugh. That weekend, she stayed off her phone almost entirely, tried to make brunch from scratch, tried to kiss me more. At one point, she looked at me across the table and said, "Do you think I'm a good person?" I didn't flinch. "You're complicated," I said. She nodded like that was the answer she deserved. Maybe it was. I kept digging. Her laptop was now encrypted with a new password, but she didn't know I'd installed a keylogger weeks ago. That's how I found out she was messaging another man in LA under a different alias. EA, short for Elizabeth Ann, I guessed. She was using her maiden initials like a shield. In her messages, she played coy, said her husband was boring but harmless, that she liked feeling unseen until someone made her real again. That line stuck with me, because I'd seen her. Every inch, every fault line, every mask. And still, she wanted more. Not more of me, just more stage time, more roles, more mirrors to reflect whatever she needed to feel alive. I didn't hate her, but I stopped hoping. The next Velvet Eye post went up that Tuesday. A still image of a woman in a gallery, faceless, blurred, champagne in hand. She calls it curation. I call it camouflage. Ashley's world was starting to tilt. She didn't know where the hits were coming from, but they were hitting all the same. Her inbox flooded with cryptic messages from colleagues, one sponsor asking if she was part of the Velvet series. She lied and said no, then went quiet for hours. That night, she drank alone on the back porch. Just sat there barefoot, staring at the dark yard like it might talk back. When she came to bed, she laid next to me but didn't touch me. I stayed awake long after she fell asleep, staring at the ceiling fan, thinking how strange it was that a woman could be in every room and still not exist anywhere at all. She'd wanted to vanish into someone new, and I was making sure she'd never find her way back. The day I became Leo Johnson was the day Ashley met a ghost in daylight. The persona took weeks to craft, polished social profiles, a sparse but convincing digital footprint, and a portfolio assembled from discarded collections, half-stolen ideas, and pieces I commissioned anonymously online. Leo was sleek, sharp, British-educated, supposedly, a minimalist who hated excess but secretly adored spectacle, the kind of critic people quoted without knowing if they understood what he meant. And Leo got invited to speak on a panel in Los Angeles. Ashley was there, of course, curated, composed. She wore a cream suit that fit like armor, hair pinned back into that severe style she always used when power was part of the performance. She was scheduled to speak after lunch, a segment called Art as Escape, Narratives of Emotional Release. Fitting, really. I arrived just before her talk began, seated in the second row, 2 seats from the end. Not close enough to be recognized, but close enough for her to feel the tension crawl up her neck. I'd grown out my beard, changed my hair, wore black-rimmed glasses I hadn't touched since undergrad. She looked at me once. Our eyes met, and nothing flickered. No spark of recognition, no hesitation. Just polite professional disinterest. She took the stage like a queen entering her own temple. And 5 minutes later, I buried her. It started with a simple remark. "I've seen this before," I said, when asked to comment on the use of mixed media in emotional curation. A derivative attempt at aesthetic sincerity propped up by the illusion of vulnerability. It's a nice try, a clever repackaging of predictable sentimentality. But ultimately, it's just another way to sell stories to tired rich men. The silence wasn't total. There were chuckles, then laughs, then the moderator smirked. The cameras caught Ashley mid-expression, mouth parted, eyes trying not to blink. Her face held that frozen grace people have when they're not sure whether to defend themselves or disappear. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, notebook open, pen idle. After the panel ended, I left quickly. I never spoke to her, never passed by. But someone in the audience had caught her reaction on video, and someone else uploaded it to Instagram. By the time I landed back in Austin, it had been shared over 40,000 times. The caption read, "When the critic finally sees through the artist." The comment section tore her apart. Some defended her, some mocked her, but all of them saw her, not as Ashley, not as Anne, but as a figure of contradiction, a woman who sold emotion but couldn't wear any on her face when it cracked. Her sponsor pulled out the next day. Ashley got the email while we were in the same room. She slammed her laptop shut and muttered something about cancel culture and jealous men. I asked if she was okay. She just said, "Some people hate seeing a woman win." But I saw her eyes. They didn't match her voice. That same night, she ordered sushi and opened 2 bottles of wine. She didn't eat much, just sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, jaw tight. She was unraveling, not publicly, not enough for the world to see. But I saw it. Her silence was getting heavier. I wasn't done. There was still one piece of her world untouched, her future. That came next. Back home, she found a letter from the bank, the kind printed in urgent type and sealed in emotionless blue envelopes. She opened it with a frown, standing in the kitchen in bare feet, unwashed hair. I watched from the hallway, hidden behind the frame, as she read the notice about her private investment account. The one she'd been funneling side income into for years. It was empty, transferred legally to a new trust, in our dog's name. 2 years ago, during a podcast interview, Ashley had once said, "The only being I really trust is my dog." Her followers loved it. It became a running joke. Now it was real. Her entire private nest egg was locked behind paws and claws. She'd have to go to court to access it, petition a judge, explain why she'd funneled hundreds of thousands into an account that she never disclosed to her husband. I watched her lips form the words in silence. This has to be a mistake. Then I stepped into the kitchen. She looked up at me with wide, uncertain eyes. I kissed her on the temple and asked, "You okay?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me like I was a stranger who somehow still knew the code to her door. That night, she started locking her office. She changed her passwords again. She began sleeping with the light on. And the next time she hosted a private event, the crowd was smaller. The sponsors weren't as eager. She smiled too much, talked too fast. Her voice trembled when she said things she used to deliver with total ease. It was working, but I wasn't done. The mask she wore was beginning to crack. Now I wanted to show the world what she looked like underneath. Ashley loved airports, not because of the travel, but because of the transformation. She once told me airports were liminal spaces, places where no one was fully themselves. Everyone there was either coming from something or headed somewhere they couldn't describe yet. She liked that, said it made her feel untethered. So when she flew to Los Angeles for the Contemporary Art Festival, she was practically vibrating. She packed 4 dresses and 3 personalities. I stayed behind, like always, the safe harbor she no longer returned to. But this time, I wasn't staying behind in silence. The event was predictable. She was on a panel. There was a reception, and then there was the gallery walkthrough, the so-called collector's preview. That was where I'd planned the moment. The gallery was white marble and industrial beams, soaked in that kind of too-cold LED light that makes people look more important than they are. Critics, collectors, influencers, all orbiting each other like dying stars. And then there was her, Ashley, poised and polished, in a black dress I hadn't seen in years. She looked like a ghost of herself. Then the host introduced the critic, Leo Johnson. My new name landed like a soft piano note. She turned sharply. Our eyes met, and still, nothing. Not even a flicker. That's how deep her illusion ran. I'd watched this woman sleep. I knew the scar on her right ankle from a childhood dog bite. I knew she cried during car commercials, and now she couldn't recognize me standing 6 feet away. When they handed me the mic, I stepped forward like I'd done it 100 times. I praised the ambition, the framing, the conceptual layering of emotional commerce. And then I dropped the match. This piece, she said, gesturing toward her feature collection, a series of portraits framed in mirror glass, is a fascinating study in hollow intimacy. The artist wants us to see ourselves in the subject, but instead we see someone desperate to sell reflection as revelation. The audience paused. Then someone laughed. Then a second person. Ashley blinked too fast. Her mouth opened, closed. She tilted her head in that calculated way she used to reset a room, but the laughter was louder this time. A camera clicked. Someone's phone was filming. The heat in her cheeks betrayed her before she could smile. She didn't speak the rest of the walkthrough. But the video, that moment where her composure shattered and she couldn't find the script, that hit the internet like a wave. It trended for 12 hours. Clips of her stunned silence played on reels with captions like, "When you get reviewed by the ghost of your lies." She didn't post anything for days. Her comments went private. Then the worst happened. Her largest sponsor pulled out, quietly. Just a terse email. "We're moving in a different direction." She returned home like a storm cloud, face taut, eyes dark. I asked how the show went. She said it was complicated. But the next day I planted the final seed. It came in the form of a simple envelope waiting for her in the mail. No return address, no stamps, just hand-delivered. Inside was a printed catalog mock-up, the kind she used to commission for her gallery clients. Except this time, it bore her name as the artist. The exhibit was titled Facade, and the cover? It was her portrait, heavily altered by AI. The eyes were too wide. The smile was uncanny. Something about it felt off in that subtle, crawls-up-your-spine kind of way. The tagline read, "An exploration of constructed womanhood and emotional fraud." I wasn't just attacking her reputation anymore. I was making her the subject of her own con. Her hands shook when she picked it up. She didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then she asked him almost too quietly, "Did you make this?" I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. Just walked out to the porch and sat with the catalog in her lap, like it might explain something the world refused to say out loud. She stayed out there until it was too dark to read. That night I heard her crying in the bathroom. Software. Almost afraid of being overheard. But I didn't comfort her. I just stood in the hallway, staring at the door she'd closed between us. She wanted to escape the life she built, wanted freedom from the stillness, the security, the love she branded as boring. Well, now she had it. Her name was no longer hers. Her image had become art. And her lies, those were finally being sold, piece by piece in frames lined with gold. Ashley came home carrying silence like it was heavy. No kiss, no hello, just a bag dropped on the counter and footsteps upstairs. She didn't even close the door. That was new. Ashley always closed doors. But it didn't matter. By then, it was already over. 2 days earlier, the bank letter had arrived. It confirmed the full and legal transfer of a private investment account Ashley had been hiding. The destination? A pet trust in the name of our golden retriever, Remy. 2 years ago, she told an interviewer, the only one I really trust is my dog. Now she had to go to court to get her money back. Through him. My signature as co-owner of that joint account had made the move possible, and she'd missed that detail. She found the letter on the kitchen counter and opened it slowly, like it might bite. She read, froze, then slid down to the floor like gravity had doubled. I stayed at the top of the stairs listening to her breathing change. She didn't speak to me that night. The next morning her lawyer called. Was this legal? She asked. Yes, I answered. That was all I said. She didn't walk the same after that. Her confidence had turned into something more careful, more aware. Like she'd just realized the floor under her wasn't as solid as she'd believed. But I wasn't finished. I invited her out for coffee. She accepted, assuming it was some sad peace offering. She showed up soft, sweater she used to wear for us dates, makeup dialed down. Her eyes were searching for forgiveness I never offered. I handed her the catalog. It looked like something she'd make for her own clients. Professional, glossy, with her name as the headline artist. But this wasn't her show. It was mine. The title, Facade. The images, distorted portraits of her, eye-altered smiles, empty, uncanny eyes. She flipped through them, slowly, then faster. Each page a little heavier than the last. The final one listed the opening, Dallas, next month, under my name. She looked up. You can't do this, she said, her voice small. I smiled. But I already did. She didn't finish her coffee. She took the catalog like it was the only proof she'd ever existed and left. I watched her disappear down the sidewalk, spine too straight, trying not to crumble where people could see. Back home, I fed Remy. Told him he was officially richer than both of us. He wagged his tail like he already knew. Ashley stayed in her office for 3 days after that. No music, no calls. Just the quiet hum of someone realizing the mirror she lived in no longer belonged to her. She showed up in Dallas for the opening. I knew she would. Not because I invited her. I didn't. But because curiosity was stronger than her pride. Ashley couldn't resist seeing how I'd painted her with her own shadows. She walked in just after 7, alone, wrapped in a black trench coat that hung off her shoulders like a costume she hadn't earned. The gallery was full. Critics, artists, curious onlookers, people orbiting the work like it gave off heat. Her face, or a version of it, stared out from every frame, distorted, haunting, a smile that never quite reached the eyes. Half-truths captured in acrylic and algorithm. Each piece had a title. Resting Disinterest. Emotional Proxy. Anatomy of Goodbye. She wandered through the space slowly, like she was walking through a crime scene where her name was the only bloodstain. No one recognized her. They didn't see Ashley, the gallery director. They saw the woman from the exhibit. The muse turned warning sign. She stopped at the final piece. It was the largest. A high-gloss canvas with layers of digital overpainting and a message embedded subtly in the background. You had to get close to read it, closer still to believe it. Everything I gave you, I buried inside this frame. She turned then, scanning the crowd, and that's when she saw me. I wasn't hiding. No disguise this time. No glasses, no beard, no distortion. Just me, Nate, standing by the bar, wearing the same suit I wore the night she told me she needed space to breathe. Her breath caught. She froze. Not out of fear, not yet, but because the game was over, and she finally recognized the dealer. She walked toward me with slow, deliberate steps. When she reached me, she didn't speak, just stared, waiting for something. A monologue, a slap, a question, but I didn't give her any of those. Instead, I handed her a copy of the catalog, the same one I'd given her weeks before, but now signed on the title page. To the woman who made this all possible. She stared at the inscription, then at me. Her mouth opened. I raised a hand. You don't get to ask anything, I said. Calm, flat, final. Then why? She whispered. Because you wanted to be someone else, I said. So I let the world meet her. She stepped back, blinking. her hands trembling now, the catalog clutched like a shield. Her voice came out dry and cracked. You ruined me. I leaned in, just enough for her to hear it over the soft jazz echoing through the space. No, Ashley, you made the mess. I just framed it. Then I walked past her. Not with anger, not with heat, just with the kind of certainty that comes after months of watching a lie unravel thread by thread. Outside, the air was cooler, cleaner. I stood on the curb for a while, letting it all settle. The crowd buzzed behind the gallery glass, alive with opinions, theories, praise. They weren't talking about Ashley anymore. They were talking about me, about the man who turned betrayal into art, about facade. I lit a cigarette I didn't intend to finish, then dropped it into the gutter. Behind me, the gallery lights burned like a memory trying too hard to survive. Let her stand in that glow. Let her feel what she sold. Let her see what I made from her wreckage. Let her burn. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this, and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.